So, the government has floated yet another rulebook for the digital economy. But this one rewires how India polices big tech. Why the policing? Ostensibly because there have been alleged anti-competitive practices that these firms have indulged in. From Google allegedly enforcing Google Play billing and preventing alternative payments, to Amazon's alleged preferential treatment to some sellers, to alleged data tying by WhatsApp Meta, to accusations of predatory pricing by Zomato, Swiggy, and Zepto. There are many instances over the years that have necessitated stricter digital competition rules. The Digital Competition Bill shifts from slow ex-post litigation to front-foot ex-ante guardrails for what it calls systematically significant digital enterprises. What does that mean? Think of it as moving from chasing harm to preventing businesses from tipping in the first place. Think of rules that are basis preemptive, predictive, forecast-based solutions. Critically, rules that sit alongside and don't replace India's already crowded digital rulebook. Once the rules are mandated, digital enterprises, think of companies like Google, Amazon, Zomato, face standing obligations. What obligations? No self-preferencing, which means they cannot favor their own platforms or products. No misuse of business users' non-public data. No coercive tying or bundling, and no quiet throttling of interoperability or steering. The catch? The enforcement stays with the Competition Commission of India. There is no new regulator. So, remedies rest on competition economics and not content policing. This means the DCB, the Digital Competition Bill, supplements, not supplants, the existing Competition Act. And that act is already being upgraded and given more teeth and nuance. So that brings us to a really critical issue. You see, India's internet firms already navigate a thicket of rules. DPDP for data privacy, IT intermediary rules for content governance, and of course, digital payments are governed by the RBI and the NPCI. What's more, the existing IT Act, which is quite old, will soon be replaced by a new, modern, relevant, upgraded set of laws under the Digital India Act. Won't adding another law to this huge bunch just complicate and convolute things? This has led to significant debate over the last 1 year. So, the government has the rules ready, but is now retuning thresholds, scope, and sequencing, seeking feedback from stakeholders, gathering evidence, and conducting market studies. This is, of course, not to shelve the idea, but to match evidence and enforcement capacity. So, is the Digital Competition Bill necessary at all? And what impact will a set of ex-ante rules based on forecasts and not results have on big tech and small digital-first companies? Let's find out. It's Tuesday, the 19th of August. I'm your host, Anirban Chowdhury, and this is the Morning Brief. My guest today is Kazim Rizvi, founder-director of The Dialogue, a public policy think tank. Hi Kazim, very warm welcome to the Morning Brief. So glad you could make time on a weekend.
Thank you so much, Anirban. Pleasure doing this with you.
So we are talking about the Digital Competition Bill. Why don't you start by giving me a detailed background to the bill? And I mean since late 2022, when a Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance studied anti-competitive practices by big tech.
Yeah. So in 22 December, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance released its report on anti-competitive practices by big tech companies with a recommendation to explore framing a Digital Competition Act. Post that, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs constituted a Committee on Digital Competition Law, CDCL, with the mandate to assess the need and feasibility of an ex-ante framework and come up with a draft DCA. This was sometime in early 2023. And then in 2024, first quarter of 2024, the committee released its report along with the draft Digital Competition Bill. And under the draft, entities with over $30 billion global turnover and at least 10 million users in India could be designated as systematically significant digital enterprises, SSDEs. These firms would face prohibitions on exploiting non-public user data, self-preferencing and limiting third-party app installations or default settings. Simultaneously, in 2023, we also saw the amendment of the Competition Act, which had introduced important reforms, raising deal value thresholds, expanding CCI's ability to levy penalties based on global turnover, and enabling faster and more targeted interventions in digital markets. And now, if we see that the Finance Committee has recently published a report on the CCI's role in the digital economy. This report came out just last week. And if you see in this report, the Finance Committee has emphasized on reviewing proposed ex-ante frameworks to ensure that any proposed regulation is grounded in evidence arrived through market studies. The report has also emphasized on improving enforcement capacity of the CCI by focusing on institutional reforms and capacity building. And also the fact that there was so much feedback and inputs. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs is now looking at the inputs and the feedback, and let's see what happens in the next year or two.
Understood. But you have to explain this to me like you would to a fifth grader, right? To explain its scope and power. And you know how you spoke about systematically significant digital enterprises. So which are those companies, for instance? And how would this bill be effective?
So let's look at some of these points. Let's look at SSDEs and why do they matter, right? These are platforms offering core digital services. There are 9 core digital services in the bill, right? We have online search engines, so your platforms like Google, Bing, social networking platforms like Instagram, Facebook. Then you have YouTube, Vimeo, WhatsApp, Telegram for real-time communication. Okay. Then you have your operating systems like Windows, Mac OS, Android, iOS, your web browsers like Safari, Chrome, etc. Then you have your cloud services like Azure, AWS Cloud, right? Then you have your advertising platforms. And then you have online intermediation services. It could be e-commerce marketplaces like Amazon. It could be ride-sharing apps like Uber, Ola, etc. Right. So these are the
It's quite
type
a
of
wide ambit.
correct. These are the type of services which basically are covered within the bill.
I think there are even more distinctions, right?
So online search engines include services that enable users to input queries and retrieve information. Online intermediation services have been defined to encompass various digital platforms, like your web hosting, your payment sites, your auction
Wow.
sites, your online marketplaces. Aggregators offering mobility aggregation, food ordering, delivery, matchmaking. And DCB then specifies obligations and mandates, SSDs, to establish reporting and compliance mechanisms. SSDs must report to the Commission about their steps to meet the obligations outlined in the bill and any associated rules and regulation.
Okay, what about Indian entities?
I mean, if you look at Indian startups and Indian companies, you have Zomato, Swiggy, you have your Make My Trip, which could get, you have your Paytms of the world. So these companies.
Understood. No, that's very clear to me. I wanted to know all these new rules in the realm of, the digital world have been influenced or inspired by some of the other rules globally. So what are the global influences on this bill? And I think one of them is, EU's Digital Markets Act of 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, so the DCB is of course not in vacuum. It's part of the European Digital Markets Act influenced in a way DCB, or DCB is inspired by the DMA. And the DMA took effect in 22 November. And in DMA, the term is called gatekeepers. What we call SSDEs, in DMA, they call them gatekeepers. Both laws share the same high-level objectives: contestability, fairness, transparency in digital markets, as discussed previously. But DCB also draws inference from the UK's Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Act, which gives the CMA, which is the UK's regulator, a tailored conduct regime for strategic market status firms. Then you have the Australia's ACCC Digital Platforms Inquiry, which also informed India's attention to bargaining imbalances and data access. And obviously, you have some US policy debates like your American Innovation and Choice Online Act. Although it's not enacted, it also sort of informs thinking on self-referencing and app store rules. Moreover, Indian lawmakers have also been aware of, some of the teething problems abroad, especially criticism around DMA's obligations, that it's too rigid. It does hinder innovation. It does create compliance burdens for small businesses, which is why now, if you look at, there is a 3-year review process which has just started of the Digital Markets Act. So stakeholders are giving inputs, and there are multiple pillars. One of them is on the impact on small businesses. I think there's also been a lot of concerns around high compliance cost and high market entry for startups within the DMA. And there is research now which is suggesting that DMA could imply an immediate cost increase of 70 billion euros or $80 billion on European companies. And the compliance cost is forcing startups to relocate outside Europe, right? Also, the fact that DMA probably is contributing to Europe's slower venture capital growth. So it's also hampering Europe's competitive edge in emerging technologies. I mean, the idea is that obviously the Indian bill has taken inspiration from these developments, but I think at the same time, to the credit of the Indian regulators and the government, they've also been very pragmatic to look into the inadvertent consequences of such proposed regulations, and which is why the ministry is now doing a market study and to study the digital competition bill and to study, the evidence around the need to bring in an ex-ante regulation and then arrive, if required, at a digital competition law or a new revised regulation for that matter.
I'm sure the concerns
Yeah.
around DMA that you explained to me would be very similar to the ones around digital competition bill. Can you unpack some of those concerns for me? Are there unique concerns that are not similar to the ones in EU, unique to Indian market, and what are the solutions?
Yeah, so on the DCB, there were many points which were brought up. I think one of the earliest flashpoints was the designation criteria of SSDEs. The threshold of 4,000 crore turnover in India or $30 billion turnover globally, plus large user bases, was seen as too low. And risk capturing firms that were sort of operating in India, but not global gatekeepers. Right. So the critics argued that, this could inadvertently burden mid-sized players and even fast-growing startups. Second was around, just the risk of overregulation and innovation, chilling innovation, right? I think here we also need to identify the fact that why do you need such a law? Primarily with respect to the time taken for the adjudication of an inquiry or a process or a case to meet its final end. It would take probably 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending, how long the investigation would go on. And the ex-ante was supposed to come in, act quickly, move fast. But if we look at the UK's experience, if we look at the European experience again, and if we look at the settlements and commitments amendments within the Indian Competition Act, we see that the issue of time can actually be solved through the current Indian Competition Act, which through its amendment in 2023 allows, in my opinion, probably for a faster process for adjudication of investigation and conduct eventually. While at the same time, if you look at the UK's experience, it's going to take at least 2 to 3 years anyway. So what I'm trying to say is that the time taken is still there, right? And if you look at the recent resolution of the Google Android TV settlement by the CCI, it happened in 12 months after the investigation report, right? So it shows that with adequate resources, the current ex-post framework can actually deliver timely and effective outcomes.
Kazim, aren't there overlaps with other laws too? For instance, one of the no-nos is no misuse of business users' non-public data. But isn't that already covered under the Digital Personal Data Protection Act?
No, you're right. I mean, if you look at the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, it governs the protection and processing of personal data across all sectors. And the DCB's focus is on competition harm, even when they involve data. Both DCB and DPA address different aspects of the digital space and have fundamentally different policy objectives. I mean, that's something which, we have to be also cognizant of. Yeah.
So, Kazim, explain to me in a little more detail the impact the Digital Competition Bill will have on small Indian businesses.
Late last year, the Dialogue had published a study where we had surveyed over 300 respondents. And by the way, this is the only study as of now which covers the length and breadth of the impact the DCB will have on small businesses. And there were some important findings. Number one, in our survey, overwhelmingly, we were able to establish that digital services enhance small businesses' ability to compete effectively. 88.8% respondents believe that digital services are essential for their business success, while 82% believe that digital services enhance their ability to compete effectively in markets. So across multiple pillars, it was very clear through our study that digital services help business to compete effectively. Similarly, 73% respondents expect a negative impact if DCB were to limit social media services ability to offer integrated services like advertising tools and online storefronts. So DCB could limit digital services ability to use insights across multiple channels. And out of our respondents, 72% highlighted expect such a negative impact from such restrictions. So these were the sort of findings from our study. And I think it was very clear that the bill would impact the ability of small businesses in terms of outreach, in terms of customer engagement, customer service, choice, terms, pricing, and of course, the ability to compete effectively.
So, in conclusion, what you are saying is that we do not need the Digital Competition Bill.
Yeah, in short, we don't need the new set of regulation right now. What we need is a very clear approach to regulation of digital markets, right? And I believe we already have that. And I think, with the amended act, we will be able to sort of continuously make it more and more effective. What we need right now, and I think Honorable Minister also spoke about, is a need to study these markets and to collect evidence whether you really need an overhaul when it comes to regulation. And the fact that, there will be a market study eventually, which will be published. I think let's wait and watch on what are the findings of the market study. We can already see that the Finance Committee has also spoke about the need for evidence-based regulation. So that is also a step forward. But at the same time, we also need to study what's happening globally. The DMA is going through a review. So let's wait and watch what are the findings of the review process of the DMA. Because we must understand that unlike India, Europe doesn't have like a very active startup-led tech industry, which we have in India, right? We have the third highest number of startups in the world. We have more than 100 unicorns. Europe doesn't factor in at all, right? It's much behind when it comes to development of tech platforms and tech startups. So the requirements and the needs of Indian and European market and the sector itself are very different. Number three is continue to build capacity of the CCI. And number four, of course, is to enforce the recent amended Competition Act and to sort of take that learning and build it up if required eventually. But I think these are the four steps which I would say for the next 2 to 3 years we should focus on. And that learning must be at the foundation of any future regulation of such digital markets, if at all.
Understood. On that note, Kazim, thank you so much for your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, if Kazim's right and India does not need the DCB, then one path left to the government is a mix of the current ex-post rules plus a stronger CCI plus settlements plus tighter sector codes. Another option, and not necessarily a path exclusive to the one I just said, is wait and watch for other case studies. Let the EU, UK rules, still at the somewhat pilot stage, play out, and then rejig India rules based on global lessons. Finally, the moot question is this. If India's goal is real market contestability, what is the smallest measurable set of rules we must impose on the true global gatekeepers without jeopardizing Indian scale-ups? We will keep watching this very interesting space for sure. That's it for today. You were listening to this episode of The Morning Brief. It was produced by me and Radhas Nayak. Sound designed by Indranil Bhattacharjee. A new episode of TMB drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday on your favorite listening platform: Spotify, Apple, Amazon Prime, Ghana, and of course, the Economic Times website and app. Also, don't miss Corner Office Conversation, our brand new fortnightly show where the top minds of ET talk to the most interesting business leaders in India and the world. The third episode, my conversation with Naveen Tiwari, one of India's most successful homegrown tech entrepreneurs, is out now. Look for new episodes every alternate Monday wherever you get your podcasts.